All righty. So that was Craig Delarge. And really what we got from this was, what can we learn from those who've come before us? What kind of wisdom do we carry? And obviously in our methodology at Narrative, stories are the way that we transfer this kind of knowledge that's been passed on from generation to generation. So yeah, I thought this would be an interesting one to start to discuss.
And it's a topic that's dear to my heart as of now because I work this sentence into a lot of talks and coaching that I do that we are descended from problem solvers. You
Mm.
know, our ancestors, they had to figure out a way to keep the human species alive and functioning and moving forward. And a lot of times it was simple, common sense cures and methodologies that they passed on forever and then, forward basically. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
Greg had some really interesting things to say and good reminders for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reminder to go back to what the community has taught us and how the communities around us have been able to survive and why certain communities thrive and others don't. And I think, in our parlance, whenever we work with clients, that's one of our steps is to remember your heritage when you're looking at your own story. We don't sort of start by telling people, tell me a story right now, and then I'll critique it and we'll make it better. But because that sort of tends to shut people down, but rather look into not your past actually, but the past of the people who've come before you, which is also another sort of non-threatening way or non-intimidating way to get to your own story. So that's one of the things that I really, kind of remembered, or I was reminded of by Craig's quote here about going back to community and what our ancestors did, how they got through certain things. What are those stories that we need to hear right now? So that's something that we actually use in our workshops and training programs to get people to think of things that happened before them, people that were there before them, and that's a gateway into your own life and your own story.
And I was your best case study because when I met you and I started to study the narrative method, the particular method of storytelling and listening, I rebelled when it came time to do the grandparent exercise and music because I didn't know my grandparents. I met one very briefly, both two grandparents very briefly in my life. So I was pretty cranky and I kept trying to negotiate that I would use an elderly person or two in my neighborhood that I felt I had much more of that feeling. And then you said no, you were very strict to the process. And then when I went back and reflected and put myself in that person's shoes, I learned a lot. And it was very informative because I learned to empathize and put myself, and for anybody who's doesn't know me, Lithuanian grandmother left her rural village in Lithuania. The czar was still in business and left there to get on a train to go to Bremerhaven, to go to Pennsylvania, to a coal mining area. So thinking what the 16-year-old girl was going through, probably had everything she was born to her sewn into her clothes and hanging on to her other relatives to get across. So that
Mm.
was an interesting gift of, this works. And then when we
Mm.
saw it in action in workshops, it was even more incredible. And
Yeah.
see, you got to be your
Yeah.
own customer
Well,
sometimes first before you
yes.
get to it.
Well, and it's interesting actually that you say that because we do, that's kind of one of our mottos, right? Is that we don't ask anybody to do anything that we're not
Hmm.
willing to do ourselves. And
Yeah.
so we've all kind of at Narrative at least gotten that experience of, and for those who are listening to us and don't know this, the exercise is to tell a story about your grandparent in the first person. So in other words, you are your grandparent and you speak in the I. And so when people do this, and I think in the context of that quote that Craig gave, we have seen a kind of a healing effect with that type of exercise. Even just what you mentioned now, it really puts things in perspective because people before us have gone through such struggles and things that they've had to overcome that when you are faced with struggles in your own life, it's a really good reminder. Say, okay, people before me with my DNA have gone through this and much
Right.
more actually. And so, and even if you're going through something that's even tougher, it's still helpful to kind of go back and sort of tell ourselves, yes, this is in me. This is part of who I am because all these people are part of who I am. And I think in the context of talking about depression and mental health and well-being in the workplace, again, I think that's why we often are, people that ask us to do these workshops, they're quite surprised, but in the end, it's not such a surprise that there is a kind of a healing effect to it, and that people come out of this feeling a bit better, actually. Because they've been able to put things in perspective. And like I said before, it is truly a gateway to your own story because you're remembering a story of a grandparent, of an elder, and it reminds you of some of the things that you've gone through that could be potential for a story for yourself.
And the act of appreciation and just to be heard
Mm,
is just an incredible gift. And it is like what you're saying, a wellness too. In one session I ran that I used the grandparent exercise in, there were two people in the room that were not getting along at all. And I didn't know that because I just assigned everybody a place in the room and then I paired this two folks into a dyad. And I realized that when I saw the eyes open wide on my person who was my client of what could go wrong. But it actually, in those moments, it went very right because
mm,
those two conflicted folks found things that they discovered about themselves that they had in common.
mm.
Now, was it an easy road afterwards? But it gave a little bit of time for some peacekeeping and for some foundational work to happen and show the rest of the room that these changes are possible.
Wow.
So, and, but you have to work on them. So I think that was another gift, an unexpected gift I saw, unintentionally planned, by the way, but it was, why we learn all the time. Every time we do these sessions, we learn a lot.
Yeah, and there are really no coincidences. It seems that that's what the universe needed for these two people to actually come together and tell each other a story about a grandparent so they could understand each other better, which makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Very powerful stuff. So yeah, if people want to learn more about this aspect of our methodology, there's a lot of different articles we've written about this in our blog at narrative.com, narrativ.com. And obviously, if you have any questions and want to learn more, you can reach out to us on our website. Please don't hesitate. And thanks, Jules, for
Ah,
doing another debrief episode with me. Really
thank,
loved it.
thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.